It's been suggested to me that that I say something about St. Peter and St. Paul, because their feast day. Peter, he's known for his failures, denied Christ 3 times, denied that he even knew him. And then, of course, there's Paul, who spent a lot of time persecuting, imprisoning the first Christians. But I want to read you a story first, a little brief introduction here. And one of the San Francisco streets, there is a funeral parlor with some beige curtains covering the windows. In front of the curtain, there is a sign which reads, "Why walk around half dead when we can bury you for $98? Okay, look at that. Why walk around half dead when we can bury you for $98? One of the homilies I was taught when I was a child by my mother, God rest her soul. I was about 7 or 8. She did bring me over to the second story window of our home, and she indicated to me a man who was standing literally across the street from our home. And she said to me, "Do you see that man?" And of course I could see him. And she said to me, "He's dead." She said, "But he won't lie down." Apparently he was the richest man in the town. But for some reason or other, my mother saw him as dead. Apparently he had accumulated millions, but never gave a penny to anybody. So anyway, the San Francisco people must have been stealing her stuff. Why you walk around half dead when we can bury you for $98? There's a better way to ask the question, and every one of the biblical writers, each in his own way, asks the very same question. Why do you walk around half dead when there is a way of replenishing your strength? You see, there's a great difference between living and existing. Everybody dies, but not everybody lives. Some people just exist. And when they die, you have to get in a doctor to certify that they are dead. But everybody knows they're dead. So why are you bringing in the doctor to certify that they are dead? Because you can't notice any difference. There was never much life there anyway. So now, two men who were very much alive, Peter and Paul. The fascinating thing for me, well, 2 things about Peter astound me. That one time he was denounced by Jesus as being possessed by the devil. "Get behind me, Satan." Jesus had been teaching and preaching for equivalent of 3 years. And it took a while for the 12 apostles to grasp who he was, that he was the eternal God, the Son of the Father. That they experienced him as a rabbi, as a teacher, and they just didn't know who he was. And then one day, the day came where Jesus asked them 8 questions in a row. He said, who do men say that I am? Some said that you are John the Baptist risen from the dead. Some said that you're one of the prophets risen from the dead. Now, I've opened the eyes of the blind. Do you know who I am? I have raised the dead to life. Do you have any idea who I am? I healed the lepers. People touched me and they got well. I opened the eyes of the blind man last week. Do you have no idea who I am? And they didn't. However, as of that incident where Jesus opened the eyes of a blind man who had been blind from birth. Peter got it finally. He said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said to him, "Peter, don't think this came from yourself." He said, "It's the Spirit of my Father in you." Now, once the apostles knew who Jesus was, Jesus' life on earth changed radically. He basically stopped doing miracles, like opening the eyes of the blind, the ears of the deaf, etc., and he set his face towards Jerusalem, and he began to teach them that he, Jesus, the Son of Man, must be handed over to the chief priests to be crucified, and be crucified. And Peter started to protest. He said, "No," he tried to stop Jesus going up to Jerusalem. And Jesus turned on him and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Interesting, isn't it? The first pope. "Get behind me, Satan." So that's fascinating for me, that the first pope could be called Satan by Jesus. Now, obviously, Peter, Jesus got rid of Satan out of Peter as well. And so Peter then followed him. The other thing that intrigues me about Peter is, again, he's the first pope, and he denies Christ 3 times on the very evening that Christ himself was betrayed and crucified. They were in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he died, and Gethsemane means olive crush. And the Christ is going to be crushed the next day. And Christ is sweating blood. And he asked Peter, James, and John to stay awake with him as he agonized over the cup of suffering that he was going to drink the next day, the crucifixion. And they all fell asleep. That's extraordinary about him as well. Shortly after that evening, Jesus was arrested, and by the guards, the temple guards, and all of the apostles ran away. Now, these are the 12 apostles who were saying, "We will die for you, Jesus. We will die for you." They all ran away. Later on that night, John came back and brought Peter with him into the courtyard of the high priest. So here is the first pope, and he's hiding away in a crowd, and he's warming his hands at a fire. You can see him. The night was terribly cold. And a young girl comes up to him and said to him, surely, you were with Jesus." And he said, "I swear to God," Peter said, I was not with Jesus." Somebody else said to him, "We know you were at the garden with Jesus. My cousin saw you there. You're the one who cut the ear of the high priest's servant at the garden." He said, "Wasn't me. I swear to God, I don't know Jesus." And somebody else said something to him like, you're one of his followers, and he denies it. The first pope. And then after that, the rooster crowed. Jesus had warned him ahead of time that day that before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he did. He went out from there and wept bitterly. You know what happened next? The crucifixion, the burial. Jesus is put in the ground. Just as Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of the big fish, Jesus will spend 3 days in the belly of the earth, and after 3 days rise again. He rises from the dead. He shows himself to the women. He shows himself to the apostles. He tells the apostles, go to Galilee in the north. And off they went to Galilee. And while they were in Galilee, they went back to their own trade of being fishermen. They still are not quite getting it fully, that they are to be fishers of men. And as they're coming in from a night of fishing on the Sea of Galilee and catching nothing, they see this man standing on the beach, and there was a charcoal fire. And John, the youngest one, the lover among the 12 apostles, it's the Lord, the risen Lord. So Peter, who was mostly naked while he's fishing and caught nothing, puts something on, jumps overboard, and swims ashore, and my Lord and my God, the first Pope. Now watch the setup here. There's a charcoal fire burning on the beach. And 3 days earlier, on Good Friday, Holy Thursday night, there was a charcoal fire in the courtyard of the high priest where Peter was standing warming himself, having denied Christ 3 times. So maybe Peter saw, oh, charcoal fire. When the breakfast was over, Jesus said to Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he's not asking anymore, like, do you love me? You know, do you love me? And Peter says, you know that I love you. He's not boasting anymore. He does say, I love you, I would die for you. And Jesus tells him to feed the lambs. And then he asks him a second time and a third time, do you love me? And Peter is hurt. It looks like Jesus is rubbing it in, that Peter denied him 3 times, that he fell asleep 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus needed them the most. And now he is asking him a 3rd time. So Peter says, Lord, you know that I love you with my poor human love. That was sufficient. So Jesus said, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Now later on that same day, Peter wasn't minding his own business. He's supposed to keep his eyes on Christ. He saw John, the younger John, standing there as well. He said, what about him? And basically Jesus said to him, what's it to you, Peter? What does it matter to you if I let him live until I come back again? You keep your eyes on me. When you were a young man, Peter, you did as you pleased. You came and went as you pleased. When you get older, somebody else will lead you where you would prefer not to go, thus indicating the type of death by which Peter was to give glory to God. And of course, some years later then, Peter, because of his witnessing to Christ, is crucified upside down in the city of Rome. That's what the great sinner, the great lover of Christ, a bit like us in a way, you know. Now Paul, because it's too long at the moment, he persecuted the Church of Christ. He supervised the martyrdom of Saint Stephen. He was Saul of Tarsus at the time, before his name was changed to Paul. He was on his way to Damascus to arrest the followers of the Way. That's what Christianity was called first. It was called the Way. And on the way to Damascus, Saul of Tarsus, the future Paul, was struck down on the road. There's no evidence I can see of that he was riding a horse, even though Michelangelo made a painting of Paul being struck down from his horse. And while he's on the ground, Jesus, speaking from heaven, said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And then Saul said, who are you, sir, that I am persecuting? And who Paul was persecuting at the time was the early Christians. And that should be a kind of a little lesson to us, that every brother Christian you meet is Christ. Christ so identifies with us that when we persecute one another, we're persecuting him. So he said, who are you, sir, that I am persecuting? He said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Paul was struck blind at the time. So he is led into this city of Damascus and hides in somebody's house or lives in somebody's house for 3 days. It's like Jesus in the tomb. Eventually, the Lord sent a man, I think his name was Ananias, I'm not sure, to lay his hands on Saul of Tarsus to pray over him. And something like scales fell from his eyes. And this St. Paul went on from there to spread the message of Christ all over the known world at that time. Now, what's the message of Christ? Well, it's starkly simple. He has died. He has destroyed our death. He has died. He is risen and with us at this moment. He will come again in glory soon. Lest you forget, he has died. He is risen. Will come again in glory soon. So if anybody ever wants to know about Jesus, the good news of Jesus, at least try to tell them that much, that he has died on the cross, he is risen, and will come again in glory soon. Amen.